Hello, today we're going to work on a tune that I wrote that I'm calling Wicked Ukulele. I actually wrote this as a sort of masterclass for the hammer-on, pull-off, and slide embellishment techniques on the ukulele, and I decided to break it into 3 different levels. The first layer being somebody's first foray into these techniques to learn the very basics, the second being those sort of next steps with the technique, and the third being a little bit more advanced and tricky. If you'd like to skip ahead to any of those parts, it's all in the timestamps down below. And if you'd like to download a tab of this, be sure to check out my Patreon page, where actually this was voted on as the tutorial for this month. And by joining, you can help decide what next month's tutorial might be. Let's go ahead and jump into the first melody, melody A, as we go through this. And it should sound something like this. I love this chord progression, this G minor, F, C. It's just this beautiful sound. And so to start playing it, we're going to utilize what's called 3-finger picking. And what that means is our thumb is going to be on the C string, our index here on the E string, and our middle here on the A. If you've never done this technique before, I have a link down below on a course that I did on my Patreon page that breaks it down. But the reason we're doing this is because we want to be low G and high G compatible. So this works with both tunings. So thumb, index, middle on the C, E, and A. Make sure that your thumb is in front of the other 2 fingers as you're practicing, just to get the most efficient tone. Now we're going to pluck the 2nd fret on the C string, place your middle finger there. Then the 3rd fret on the E string, place your ring finger there. Then we're going to pluck the open on the A. And then we're going to do our first embellishment technique, a hammer-on. To do this, we're going to take our index finger and we're going to hammer it onto the 1st fret of the A string. Now the trick to doing this technique really well is to make sure that your position and effort is really efficient. So you want to be right next to that fret wire. The further back you are here, the harder it is. The closer you are to that wire, the easier it is. And you also want to make sure that your angle is really good. Notice how my index finger isn't relaxed like this. I'm using the tip of the finger to hammer onto that 1st fret on the A string. And make sure that the note is still ringing a little bit to also give a little bit extra oomph to your hammer-on. So you can see that as I do this, I let that note ring for a moment, and then I do the hammer-on, just like so. Again, tip of the finger right into the fret. After you've done that, you're then going to play open on the A, so take that index back off, and then play 3 on the E, and then 2 on the C. And that finishes that first measure. If you've never done this technique, go ahead and stop here and just practice that hammer-on a bunch to get comfortable with it. But as you get comfortable, we go on to measure 2. And measure 2 sounds something like this, which you'll notice is going to be using that pull-off technique. I think pull-offs are a little bit easier. Some people find them harder, so it's okay if, you're in one camp or the other. But we're going to start by playing our open C string, then 1 on the E with your index finger here, then 3 on the A with your ring finger, and then we're going to do a pull-off to open on the A. So what's important when you're doing this pull-off is that you physically pluck the string with your ring finger. That's the trick. When my ring finger is here fretting that 3 on the A, when I do a pull-off, I don't just remove the finger. That doesn't create enough sound. I physically pluck the string with that finger as it comes off, and that creates this sound. Just like I pluck it with my other finger when I play it, I'm going to pluck it with this one to do that pull-off. I find that pull-offs are easier to get lots of volume on when you do this. And I'm pulling kind of down and out just a little bit. So then from there, you're going to play 1 on the E, 0 on the C, and then 1 on the E again. And that finishes that measure, which sounds like this. Now going on to measures 3 and 4 together, this is going to use our 3rd technique, the slide. Now you'll notice that with this slide, it's actually right at the beginning, and you'll see it's that little marker, just a little itty bitty, not arrow, but just line going up to the 3. And what this means is that you're going to slide into that 3 from wherever you were before. So in this case, we were just at that 1 on the E string. So what we're going to do is pluck the 0 on the C and the 1 on the E, and immediately slide that index finger to the 3rd fret of the E string. Now, when you're doing a slide, the big trick to making this work is making sure that that index finger increases the pressure ever so slightly as it's coming up, and you're aiming right here. You don't even want to worry about anything that happens between this point and this point other than increasing the pressure ever so slightly and stopping right here. So what I like to do is visualize it. I'll play this, but when I play this, I'm looking right there. I'm looking right where I want this finger to go, and I'm visualizing that finger stopping right there. And I'm just going to sit here and essentially go. Now, you might overshoot it, you might undershoot it, and that's okay. That's part of practicing with this. But just visualize that, increase the pressure a little bit, and you'll have it. And this one, unlike the other two, has no rhythmic value taking place before. You're just going to immediately do that slide. And then you're going to play open on the C, open on the A, 3 on the E, which is already there, open on the C, open on the A. And if you look ahead to the next measure here, you're going to let that open A keep ringing. If you look at the tab and you see that 0 in parentheses, that just means they're tied together, so you don't play it again. Then we're going to play the 3 on the E, 0 on the C, 0 on the A, 3 on the E, 0 on the C. So a lot of filler going with that slide at the very beginning. And it should sound something like this. And that wraps up that first melody section. And so this is what this whole thing sounds like now, starting with that measure 1 on melody A. It should be something like this, nice and slow. Now, at this point, we'll typically repeat it and play it twice if you were performing this as a song. But for now, let's go ahead and go on to melody B. So at this point, it's going to get a little bit more advanced, and you should already be somewhat comfortable with these techniques because the way that the slides are going to be used here and the hammer-ons and stuff can be a little bit more interesting, to say the least. We're going to start with this higher G minor. So what we'll do is we'll take the ring finger, place it on the 7th fret of the C string, the middle finger here on the 6th fret of the E string, and the index here on the 5th fret of the A string. We're going to pluck our E and A together, and then we're going to pluck the C, and then the E, and then the A, and then the E, and then the C. Wait a minute, there's no hammer-ons or pull-offs or slides in this measure. And that's right, it's just a measure of picking. There'll be plenty more in the following measures, don't worry. But this first measure of B sounds like this. Nice, pretty sound. Then we go on to measure 6 and the party gets started. We're going to be doing a double slide. And by double slide, what I actually mean here is 2 strings. You're going to take your ring finger, place it on the 5th fret of the A string, and your index finger here on the 3rd fret of the E string. Now I'm going to play this whole measure so that you can hear it, but it starts with this right here. Lots going on. So once you have that ring finger here on 5 of the A and this index here on 3 of the E, you're going to pluck those 2 together, and then you're going to slide down this time, down to 3 on the A with the ring finger and 1 on the E with the index. It's the same logic we had on the slide earlier. You want to increase the pressure ever so slightly, this time over 2 fingers, and you want to visualize where you're going. Obviously, it's more challenging because you're using 2 fingers instead of just 1, and the timing is a little bit different because you have to let this note ring and then slide. Makes it a really tricky part, but it sounds so cool when you get it just right. So increase that pressure and slide and stop just before the fret wire. You don't want to go too far down like this. You want to be right before the fret wire on the frets that you're at. So right here before 3 and right here before 1. So we've got this down to this. And so that sounds again like we're going to play the open on the C, the 1 on the E, 3 on the A, which is already there. Then we're going to take all of our fingers off because the very end of this measure is going to be 1 on the A with the index finger, and then pull off to 0 on the A. Now, this I find really difficult, and a lot of my students over the years have struggled with pull-offs on the 1st fret. It took me longer than I care to admit to figure out why it was so hard for some people, and the reason is thumb position. When you are doing hammer-ons and pull-offs, it's okay for your thumb to be squared back behind. That's usually the way to do it. However, when you're doing a pull-off from 1 on the A to 0 on the A and nothing else is there, you'll find that the uke kind of falls out of your grip when you do it. So what I like to do is use this little area right here with this area on my hand to actually rest the ukulele like so, with my thumb kind of coming over the top, not really, extremely, but just coming over the top like this and kind of touching it so that my index finger is going to be a little bit slanted. See how it's not quite straight up and down, a little bit of a slant to play that one. And then when I do the pull off, instead of it just being straight down like this, because that can kind of fall apart as I'm trying to pick and do all of that, I'm going to do it like this instead. And you see it's just a little bit at an angle, but that provides the stability to hold up the ukulele as I'm doing it. So it's kind of a next level pull-off technique for when you're going on a string to all open, but it's an important one to kind of get comfortable with. Again, it's not like this or anything. It's nothing extreme, just a little bit resting there and allowing the uke to be supported. So that measure looks something like this, right? We have it going. And then from here we go on to measures 7 and 8, which are very similar to 3 and 4, but there's a hammer-on thrown in there. So we're going to do the same slide up to 3 to start, and then we're going to play the same open C, but then this index finger here has to collapse with a bar on the E and the A strings on the 3rd fret so that you can play that 3 on the A next. So a trick to that is you can start the slide with the bar. You couldn't do that on measure 3 because you needed to play the open A string, but here it works out great. And then we're going to play 3 on the E, open on the C. And then this is our first what we call grace note. If you look at the tab here, you see that little 3? Do you see how it's smaller than the 5? That means it's supposed to be played with no real rhythmic value. It's supposed to be played and immediately go into the 5. So we're going to play that 3, and we're going to immediately hammer on to 5. The 3 is going to be played with that index finger partial bar, and the ring finger is going to hammer on to the 5th fret on the E string. Same exact logic we did at the hammer on at the very beginning of our song. Now we're on our E string though, which I find to be a little bit more tricky. And so getting right up into that fret wire using the tip of the finger, all of the same techniques we talked about before are used here. And then from this point, it's just going to play 3 on the A, 5 on the E, which is already there, then 3 on the E, taking that ring finger off, 3 on the A, and open on the C. And so that whole sequence, measure 7 and 8, sounds something like this. And now that whole melody B should be something like this. And we would repeat this melody B just like we repeated melody A. At this point, though, we go on to melody C, and this is quite advanced. This is quite a bit harder than melody B and much, much, much harder than melody A. But if you're looking to take those next steps with this technique, or these techniques, this is the thing to play. I had so much fun writing this and playing it. Oh, it's really fun to do these techniques. So let's go and start with measure 9, which is, I think, the easiest of these parts with that G minor chord. That's going to sound something like this. And you'll notice that's very similar to what we played at the beginning of melody B. We're going to be playing that same G minor chord, 7, 6, 5 on the C, E, and A. We're going to pluck our E and A together, and then our C, E, and then instead of just plucking the A, like we did earlier, we're going to take our pinky finger, place it here on the 8th fret of the A string, and we're going to pluck that, and then we're going to pull off with our pinky finger to the 5th fret on the A string. So this is the first more advanced part of this, is doing a pull off with the pinky. It's hard. Our pinkies are weak. So this is a good little pinky exercise. It's like lifting pinky weights. Same logic as before. We want to make sure we're a nice crisp angle, and then we're actually physically plucking the string as we do that pull off. And it's going to take some practice, and it's normal if your pinky develops some redness or soreness, because calluses have to be built to get this really comfortable. But that measure 9 is something like this. And then we go on to measure 10, and measure 10 starts off the same as measure 6, the same exact. So it's that double slide with the index and ring fingers here on 3 and 5 going down to 1 and 3, exactly the same as what we did before. But then it does this really intricate looking hammer-on pull-off sequence. And this is our first time that we've done a hammer-on and a pull-off together. But truthfully, that's the coolest sound on the ukulele. So what we're going to do is after we've done that slide down, so we're going to do this. And that's my favorite sound of this whole song. I just love that. It's just so nice. But anyways, we're going to play open on the A string using that same logic we did before with the pull-off of keeping the hand sort of, held by this knuckleball instead of just with the thumb squared behind. We're going to play open on the A. We're going to let this ring for a moment. You'll notice if you know how to read music, this is an 8th note, and then the next two are 16th notes, so they're going to take place more quickly. So we'll play that open A. We're going to do a hammer on to 1, and then pull off immediately to 0. So it goes something like this. And then we need to make sure we get the ring finger on 3 of the E immediately after that open A is played. So the timing is something like this. Now, when you do a hammer-on pull-off, it's exactly the same as doing a hammer-on and doing a pull-off. It's just going to take place simultaneously, well, rather immediately adjacent, and that makes it kind of tricky to work on, but it's such a cool sound. So just make sure your hammer-on is nice and crisp with that finger angle. It's okay to be a little bit at an angle here with the finger pointed towards the right shoulder because of the way we're bracing it to make that pull-off a little bit easier, right? If your thumb is squared the whole time behind here, it can be tough to support the ukulele. This is why this is the more advanced sequence. And I want you to practice when you're working on this, going immediately to the 3 on the E. Because if you just do this, it's not quite right. And then we're going to play 1 on the E with our index finger, and that wraps up measure 10. And it should sound something like this. Sound. And we go from here on to measure 11. And I won't lie, I made 11 as crazy as I possibly could while still sounding really cool. Measure 11 is the culmination of all of this because we're going to use slides, we're going to use hammer-ons and pull-offs together, we're going to give some of them rhythmic value, we're going to make others of them accent grace notes. It's using everything that we've done to this point to create these different sounds. So we're going to start with the index finger on 1 of the E sliding immediately up to 3 on the E. And we're going to have that be a bar just like we did previously so that we're ready to go with the next part. Because after this, we're going to play open on the C, 3 on the A, immediately hammer on to 5 on the A. Remember that the reason for that is because the 3 is that little itty bitty text, and we learned earlier that that's a grace note, so it has no rhythmic value. You just play it, immediately move on. But then you're going to do that hammer on and you're going to hold that 5 for a moment. And then you're going to pull off that 5 to 3 on the A string. So it goes. And this time that value is a quarter note. It's a full beat that the 5 is going to be ringing for. So you have to let that ring for a moment before you then pluck it with that ring finger to do a pull off. Then you're going to play 3 on the E string all by itself. Then you're going to play 3 on the E again and immediately do a hammer on to 5 on the E string with the ring finger because that second 3 that's listed there is a little subtext, that grace note. So we have 3 on the E, then again, immediately hammer on to 5 of the E. Now, the good news is measure 12 is pretty simple. Measure 12 is actually going to be exactly the same as measure 8, what we did earlier. It's going to be 3 on the A, 5 on the E, 3 on the E, taking the ring off, 3 on the A, 0 on the C. So 12 is nice and easy. 11, on the other hand, a bit of a doozy. And so measure 11 sounds something like this. It goes. The rhythm there is what's really important. When you're looking at it, if you don't know how to read music, that's okay. Listen very closely and notice that not all of the notes are treated equally for their duration, right? Some notes are longer, others are shorter. If you do read music, that makes this a lot easier because you can see, oh, the very first one's a grace note, so it happens immediately. The next one's a quarter note. I'm going to let that last for a full beat. Then we do the pull off to 3. That's an 8th note, so then I'll play the 3 on the E, and then another grace note really quick, right? It's all about getting that rhythmic integrity comfortable. And it starts to show how hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides can be used as embellishments to transition between notes or just for notes on their own. It's pretty cool to really hear it. And if you can play this, you can really start to internalize these techniques. But let's hear what all of this melody C, this third most advanced melody, should sound like. It should be something like this going through. And we can repeat this again if we're playing this as a sort of song. Now, here's what's cool is from here, we just go back to melody A. We go back to where it all began, the nice low chords. And we use that to end the tune. And the reason I did this is because even though the earlier parts, or melodies B and C, are much more complex than melody A still sounds great. And it's not about using these techniques to make your playing as complex as you can all the time. It's rather about using them in different tasteful ways to make it sound better. And I hope that this, little exercise of a tune can help showcase that. I don't think melody C sounds better in every way than melody A, despite it having so much more of these techniques utilized. I think melody A still sounds really nice. And that's why I decided to end it, with that melody A, going back to the simple, because sometimes simple is best. Now, if you want to perform the song, you can play A and repeat it, B, repeat it, C, repeat it, back to A and repeat it, or mix and match however you'd like. But there you have it. That's the tune Wicked Ukulele, which I wrote to really show off these techniques. If you'd like extra work with these techniques, I actually did a Zoom workshop, which is available for download on my website, as well as streaming on my Patreon page. You can find a link to that down below that goes over all the different embellishment techniques if you need a little bit extra help with it. Again, if you'd like to download a tab of this, that is linked down below as well. And if you are already a patron, thank you so much for your support. I am able to do this for a full-time career thanks to people just like you. With your support, it just means the world to me. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below or shoot me a message on Patreon anytime. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time for the next tutorial. Thank you so much.